Carl, don't mind us, Carl. We're just having fun.
Yeah, until you're ready.
Hey, I love it. I love it. I think it's great, man. It's like Todd said, man. That's a good sized crowd there at Lone Tree. I'm glad to see it. And yeah, so how many people are at Lone Tree?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16.
16.
16.
Dang. Well, you're right. You guys beat the Zoom crowd. Usually it's the other way around. We usually have more people on Zoom than we do in the room. Excellent. Love to see it. So I guess we can get started here. We will have, I'm sure, a couple of people tagging in on Zoom, but let's go ahead and get the evening started here. First, do we have any guests in the room?
We do? Yes.
Oh, we do. Good.
Yeah.
And if you would, tell us who you are and how you found us and type of photography you like to do.
Oh, stand up.
Who you are, how you found us, and what kind of photography you like.
My name is Diane Curcio. I moved here about a year and a half. I was, my son recommended a powerhouse camera that is really challenging. So I started Googling photo and I found that this is really close to where I live. So
Awesome, good.
and I'm hoping I can manage to learn how to deal with Lightroom.
There's a couple of people that have had a camera for a year or so around, and so I'm sure somebody can help.
What system is it?
Lightroom?
Kind of camera.
Oh, the camera.
Yeah.
Fujifilm, yeah,
There's probably a Fuji shooter in the room, not me.
yeah, it's like a computer too, so that, and I have to deal with a computer. That's a computer.
Well, yeah, we've got a few Fuji folks in the group, myself included. So yeah, I mean, obviously we can help you along the way and have lots of educational opportunities and educational materials, tutorials and stuff like that. Plus, we've been recording our meetings for the past 5 years, so we have an archive on our website and on our YouTube channel of all kinds of things about different types of photography and everything else. And in fact, tonight we'll be learning something about aviation photography, which we haven't had a presentation on, as I can remember. So that'd be awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And on Zoom, I see we've got Bob Corson. Same question to you, Bob.
Well, I've been part of Lone Tree, kind of got out of it for a little while, been doing other stuff. Familiar with your group, just summer is a busy travel time. So, and I'm hiking and doing a bunch of other stuff other than with a camera. So, but I'm familiar with your group. Actually, hopefully I'll try to join and participate.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us and joining us this evening, and hopefully you join us permanently too. We'd appreciate that, and I think you'll find it quite informative and quite a friendly group.
Can't imagine friendly photographers.
You'd be surprised.
You're absolutely right. What do you want to be here for? No, just joking. They're awesome. Just join. Come on, Bob.
There you go. And also, I want to say hi to David. David's a new member here, had joined us previously for a meeting. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm newer to photography and I've been running on Canon systems for a while now.
Right. Awesome. Great. Well, great to have you as part of the club here. Appreciate it.
Forgive me if I'm a little slow.
No worries. No worries. A couple of things I want to mention before I turn it over to Kyle and Jim. As you saw in the newsletter and the email I sent out with the newsletter, that our September competition has been bumped one day. It'll be on the Thursday, September 25th, instead of our normal Wednesday evening. We had to move because the Lone Tree Police Department is taking over the facility on that Wednesday night, so they have priority, and we had to move. So hopefully it doesn't conflict with too many people's schedule, and hopefully if you can't be there in person, you can be here with Zoom, one way or the other. Our August competition meeting, same night, same stuff. That'll be in 2 weeks. And of course, our competition this month is Patterns and Nature. And I've already gotten a couple of submissions for that. Keep them coming, people. And I can't think of anything else I need to cover right now. I think we've got it all. So, Kyle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good, Carl. Thank you. Welcome tonight, Jim. Jim, is it Koepnick?
Koepnick.
Yes. For his presentation on aviation. And as Carl mentioned, this is a new one for us, so I'm pretty excited. Jim is a Sigma ambassador, and he shoots aviation, sports, and documentary photography. He has shot more than 1,000 aircraft while on air-to-air missions as chief photographer for the Experimental Aviation Association. That's 1,000 aircraft from the air. It's crazy to me. His photography has been published in Life, Time, People, Popular Mechanics, and Men's Journal, to name a few. Jim is based in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Jim, feel free to add to that. If you don't have anything, we'll turning it over to you.
All right. Thanks for having me. And I not sure if any of you or all of you have an interest in aviation, but for me, I've probably shot aviation. I've lived in Oshkosh, which is the home of EAA, and they have one of the country's biggest fly-ins. So it's always been a part of my life, and I worked at EAA for 28 years. So I was doing aviation all the time. But there are so many other aspects to it. And as we're all photographers, I hope that's what you're going to get out of this presentation is, we all have different equipment and we all have different creative styles, but going to fly-ins and aviation can let you practice with and put all your talents to use in so many different areas. So I'm going to try to share screen here. This is tips, ideas, and inspirations. And there are a lot of pictures in this. And I kind of like to do that, overload it with pictures and fewer words, just to give you ideas, to inspire you a little bit, to see what some of the options are out there for you to stretch your imagination. For a lot of my friends anyway, when we talk about aviation photography, we're talking about air shows. And at one point, when I worked for EA and in the marketing part of it, air shows were second only to NASCAR in the country as far as the most photographed events. So it has quite a following, and even in Wisconsin, Oshkosh is the biggest show, but there are 4, 5, 6 other cities that have pretty major shows too. So it's something that's out there and gives you a lot of opportunity. So go through a little visual thing here of what some of this can involve is we all think, at least my friends do anyway, that it's air shows. It's the Blue Angels, the Thunderbirds. It's jets and noise and smoke. But there are other things. There are cockpits, old and new and just interesting things to photograph. There are details that you can do that you can be graphic about. Sort of like the circular stairway that you had in your background picture. There's a lot of little things if you like to shoot close, if you like graphic detail. There is air to air. That's sort of on the top end as far as basically needing a really good pilot and a safe pilot and a good briefing, and safety is always first. There are fireworks, there are people, there's nose art, and there's just feature photography. So when I go to an air show, it's funny because I'm trying to show you all the options, but I'm as human as the next when you start hearing the jets roar and I want to get out to the flight line and I want to try to capture something. And it's addictive. But before the air show, after the air show, there are just so many options as a photographer to go out and work your craft. Just a quick one. If you have any questions, if you have something that pertains to something that's up on the screen and you want to ask it, that's fine. We can do question and answers at the end of this too. I'm not going too far into some of the equipment, but just basically my camera settings is I'm using aperture value when I'm walking around for portraits, when I want to control the depth of field. I'm using shutter priority for airplanes during the air show, either to slow it down to show the prop blur or speed it up for a jet to freeze the action. If I'm doing an air-to-air, I'm going to be in shutter priority again because I want to slow the shutter speed down so I can get a prop blur. Or if it's bumpy, I'm going to raise it so I can find a compromise between not freezing the prop and getting a sharp picture. And so many air shows now are having night air shows and fireworks that it's fun to shoot. And I'm going to go into manual for that. And I've found that things change a little bit. I'll show you with some of the pictures, but the standard settings that I use and I've seen online quite a bit don't seem to work with some of the newer shows that are adding drones and airplanes and lasers. So you've got to be flexible with this. So let's talk about on the ground. This is what, before the air show, uh, there are so many things to shoot. And as I go through this, it was one thing when I worked for EAA and I basically did the air-to-air work. I was up flying with another airplane for magazine stories. But the concept of a magazine story, a newspaper story, you want to tell the story of what's happening. I mean, that's what you're trying to share. And I've always thought that when I cover an event like this, like an air show, I want to do the same. And I'm going to do it on Facebook mostly because it's easier to post more pictures. And I'm going to do it on Instagram with some of my better pictures as just singles. But I'm trying to tell a story to my friends, to other photographers, to other pilots, and let them know how big this is and some of the feature things going on, some of the aircraft that are there. And I want to do it photographically to the best of my ability. I tend to use telephotos a lot. I like to compress. I like to, I just like the look. It's something I've always seemed to like telephotos over a wide angle. I love the compression. I love that you can go in and eliminate a lot of distractions from the outside. And you can just, I've used the word graphic, but between colors and angles and shapes. And I just love to see all this stuff come together in something that my brain says, I think you have a picture there. And you can do rows of airplanes. This is a little example of, I just mentioned that I like telephoto lenses and I like the way it compresses. I like the way it cleans up everything. But again, I'm trying to tell a story and I've got a lot of lenses to use and I want to be creative. I want to try some different things. So you can also, this is a 14 to 24, I think, put on a monopod and held up in the air. And pretty much they're Hail Marys. I put the camera on timer and kind of get the camera in position and take a look at it, and then I'll make some adjustments and try it again. You can, today's cameras will, a lot of them will go to your iPhone on an app and you can see what you're shooting and trigger it from there. You can also use, just a cable release to help you along on something like this. Again, trying to tell a story, and I'm going to use that over and over, I think, throughout this presentation, because I think for my type of photography, that's what I want to do. It isn't just here's an airplane, but what's the story? And this was an airplane that came out. Time seems to get away from me, but probably 10 years ago. And it was extremely popular at the time. And I wanted to show that. I wanted to show all the people that were around it and all the movement that it had. So I used a tripod and just bracketed my shutter speed really slow until I was getting the amount of blur that I wanted. You know, there you can do beautiful sunset pictures. This was an opportunity to try multiple strobes with a sunset behind it. This was a magazine picture, and I just wanted something different than the plane just sitting there. I wanted something a little more dramatic. So, even something like this, I don't do multiple strobes that often, but it worked out great in this case. And it's one of those little things that says, maybe I should do this more often. Maybe, this is a different look that I can use and it's kind of cool. Sunset with the light kissing off the side of a P-51 Mustang or from the other side. It's a chance. A lot of this is geared around air shows that you go to, but this is at a private airport. And that's something else you can do if you have an airport nearby, if you have friends that fly, that'll give you access in there and just work on some pictures that fit your style. And this is a small airport, and every time I drove by it, I could see a plane sitting there, and I knew I was looking directly at the west. And it's like, I know that if I shot this at sunset, I could do something with the sun and a silhouetted airplane. So I had my friend and his girlfriend pull their plane up on the ramp, and we just waited for the sun to go down and shot some pictures like this. One thing, it's easy, and it's something that I tend to do a lot. I get caught up in um, doing stuff quickly. So when you're shooting an airplane on the ground, it's easy just to shoot it from the position that you're in, that you're standing from eye level. But sometimes just laying down on the ground gives you a whole different perspective of it and gives you a shot that not a lot of other people are going to get, maybe. All right, I talked about details, and this is one I used a shallower depth of field on this because I wanted to capture the texture of the wood and the grain and the contrast of the bolts at the front of the propeller. And I didn't want all the engine parts and everything to be that much in focus to complicate the look of the whole thing. But it's also something that you may want to shoot at a higher f-stop just so that you can get more in focus and use depth of field to your advantage. This is one staying tight on the engine so I could get the red, white, and blue and a contrasting engine. Again, moving in, looking for something that's graphic, trying to keep this symmetrical and focusing on the little logo. Sometimes it's not just airplanes. There are old cars that might be in an antique area. And this is one where I just loved all the metalwork and the symmetry of everything. Cockpits are something that if I'm shooting for a magazine, it's something they want because they want to see what's inside. But in doing that, as I've done so many airplanes, it's really interesting how they're all different. How in this case, it was an pretty much older antique plane. You've got the leather helmet, and it's pretty basic. This one too, I wanted to just show the airspeed indicator and let depth of field fall off, just for a different kind of look. Newer ones are all glass cockpits, and I was going to say in the beginning it presented a challenge, but with all the current avionics that are out there, they're bright enough that they show up in bright sunlight, and you can get interesting pictures with all the gauges, the everything that's done electronically. And you'll see that I play with depth of field a lot. I like that shallow depth of field. I like focusing on one thing. You know, people, we think of air shows with airplanes and pretty much that, but it's such an opportunity to shoot people that are there, whether you're posing them, whether you're capturing candidly. You know, two options here. I see a lot of people, you know, you say, can I take a picture of you while you're playing? And they'll stand right next to it. They'll sit in it like this. You know, you do get to see pretty much all of the airplane, but the person is really small. Here's an option with a telephoto lens. I had her stick her head out a little bit and use the compression from the telephoto to stack everything up. So you can see the airplane, but you can also see the pilot. This is inside a hangar. Sun was low. It was really harsh. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And as I walked around and the pilot turned and looked at me, I knew that that harsh lighting was perfect with the leather jacket. And it was an older vintage plane. And it just had a really good look. You know, and again, it's your chance to do what you like to do in photography. So if you want to convert it to black and white, there are a lot of things that I'll convert when I'm shooting aviation into black and white. It just looks different. It can be an eye grabber sometimes, and especially vintage pictures, but even some of the modern jets, you can get some really striking pictures just working in post-production and playing with it in black and white. You know, I shoot all sorts of different lenses. I don't know if I have a favorite for portraits. I pretty much use my 70 to 200 for a lot of things. But this was to show that you could do a portrait with a wide angle. So this is a 28 millimeter. And what I do like about if I'm going to shoot a portrait with a wide angle lens, it's that I can tell a little bit more of a story, that I can go in close in the face looking for the expression that I want and have that in sharp focus. And with a wide angle lens, it'll let the rest of the you know, in this case, the rest of the airplane uh, kind of be there to let you know what's going on. It isn't just a person, but you can see the airplane. But with the shallow depth of field, you know, it draws you back to the eyes, I think. This is a little bit longer telephoto. Someone was just taxiing in to park, and I just happened to be quick and shot him through the struts. But it was one of those where I just liked the smile on his face, and I liked the colors in the goggles. And a lot of fly-ins will have reenactors. And it's a chance if you want to try to set up some old looking pictures, try posing in that look of the 40s. It's a good opportunity to shoot some pretty interesting portraits. And this is one we were waiting to taxi out in another airplane, and this is just one of the FAA controllers. And she was directing all the planes in the runway. So while I was waiting, I just did a series of what she was doing. And you know, sometimes things just happen in front of you and you need to be ready. Okay, ground to air, which is kind of what we're doing at an air show anyway. And this is at a small little airport in southern Wisconsin. But shooting planes landing and taking off it's a fun thing to do, and it's a good chance to try your panning skills. And this case, I'm looking at the prop. I must be at like 125, maybe a 180th. I'm not sure. I'm trying not to freeze the propeller, but I'm trying to pan along and blur the background and keep the airplane sharp. Here's one as it's coming in, and I have a much faster shutter speed on this one because you see the prop almost frozen. And what I've found, and it's not like this great revelation, except it was for me when I actually realized it, was that when a plane comes into land, they cut the power. So the propeller's not turning as fast. But when they're taking off, they're revving the propeller up, to a pretty high RPM. So it's much easier to get a full prop circle. So as much as it's maybe easier to shoot sometimes when they land, you're just not going to get as good of a prop blur as when they're taking off. And this was something just to be a little different. I had been panning airplanes landing, and it gets kind of boring after a while. I find that some of it's like, I think it's like fishing, and it's always one more cast, one more cast. I'm normally a bite on the next one. But what I'm trying to do is get that perfect pan shot where the airplane is just tack sharp and the background has got a great blur. And I realized that this was getting kind of boring. So I thought what I do is slow shutter speed, but focus on the guy with the flags out there, or the paddles, that was directing airplanes after they landed. And I let the planes blur out behind him for just something a little different. Airshow is what I know I tend to think about because of as I said before, the action, the noise, the smoke. It kind of makes you just want to go out and shoot. And it is, especially when there's a team of planes like this, and there's a lot of smoke and a lot of noise, and it's just a lot of fun to do. So what I'm trying to do then is, in general, I want to show all the airplanes that are in the formations, and I want to try to do something creative with the smoke, with the angles that it's at, and something that's going to be artistic and have a good composition to it. This one, and sometimes if you go to a show like Oshkosh, and I'm not sure if you have any big air shows in Colorado, but Uh, if you end up going several days, you'll find that they pretty much do the same act every day. So it gives you a chance to, especially if you miss something one time, they're going to do a crossing maneuver. Or they're going to do, in a case like this, he's going to do a turn on his wingtip like this. So I'm just ready, and I know it's going to happen. So I'm just going to shoot through it. It's easy with airplanes to just you want to show the whole thing. And I'll do this. A plane's coming and it's like I want to get the whole thing in. I want to get all the wings in. And I realize it's an okay picture, but it's a little bit boring. The sky isn't great. And as with almost everything photographically, what makes a good picture is the light in the background. And in this case, the light's so-so. The underside of the plane is in shadow, and the background is we had this was shot in late July, so we had some of the Canadian smoke come down, so we didn't have the sharpest skies all the time. So it's all right, but waiting until he lands, shooting with a long telephoto, I'm not seeing all the airplane, but I'm feeling a little more, I don't know, a little more action, a little more interest in this picture than in the other one. This is one where the two planes come in and they fly along each other at an angle like this. And the first day that I shot this, it worked out really good. I was using a 400 to 800 millimeter lens, and I'm always shoot in autofocus continuous. And in this case, I'm shooting Sony, so I could put it in aircraft mode, or if it was going to lock onto an airplane, set it to that. And it worked out really good to shoot it. A couple of days later, I was going to try this from another location, and they broke off this little formation before they got to me. So sometimes, especially if you're going to go more than one day to an air show, is see where some of this happens and try to, if you miss it on one day, you've got another day to try to make it up. You know, it's easy, I think, with jet teams because let me go back one. With this, I tend to shoot planes that have propellers at 1/400th of a second or 1/320th. When I start getting down to 1/250th, I'm starting to get too much movement and my percentages are really low as for what I'm going to have in focus. So I'm tracking these, and you're not going to get, you know, if I'm lucky to get 15 or 20% in focus, I think that's a lot because both planes are moving a little bit. With jets, I can shoot at 1/2000th of a second, or I've tended for some of the military jets to go to 1/4000th of a second because they go by so fast, and it makes it a whole lot easier to track them. You know, it's almost impossible for me when they go by when they're perpendicular to me. They're at 600 or 700 miles an hour sometimes, and I cannot pan that quickly and stay on them. But after they go by, they'll start pulling up, and that's when it's easier to lock on focus, and you start seeing vapor being formed on the wings, and you can pick up the afterburners. So it ends up making, I think, a really cool picture. Here's one, and I'm not going to tell you I did this on purpose. This was an accident. I thought I missed everything until I looked at it in post-production and realized how sharp it was below and then the heat distortion above. And I just squared it up a little bit in Photoshop and uh, and I thought it made a kind of a cool picture. You know, the other thing I mentioned, it's light and background. And if you just have a plain sky or a gray sky, it's not the easiest to get a good picture. This was a couple of years ago. We had beautiful clouds. It was just before a night air show, so the sun was going low, adding some color to the sky. F-22 goes by and starts pulling up, and he's starting to produce vapor, and you can see the afterburners. And one of my favorite pictures. This was the same night. The sun's getting lower. It's putting some nice warm light on the plane when it comes by. It would be great if I could say this is all skill getting this, you know, but a lot of it, so much of it for the background and the light is just you've got to be there when it happens. You've got to be ready, you know, and then you get these little gifts like this. This is one, the B-2 bomber, where I was on the flight line and I wasn't getting that much. If you go to a major air show, and they're all different. In Oshkosh, you have to have a press pass, and that can get you into a little pit area, or it can get you into a tower, and none of them are maybe the best for viewing. And I'll tend to go off to the sides a little bit, trying to get them when they turn. And I wasn't having much luck, so we walked back to where I had parked my car, and we were just sitting there killing time. And the B-2 made its pass, and it came right over our parking lot. And and I got a shot from the parking lot I never would have gotten had I been up on the flight line. All right, the jet teams, these are the Thunderbirds. Blue Angels do pretty much the same thing. They'll do passes, they'll do something like this, and it's really a cool shot to get. And it's even cooler when you can line the noses up. Um, and it's easy to do. You're at 2,000th of a second. You can freeze all this. But you take a look at this and, you know, it's pretty dramatic. It's tight, sky's blue, but this is what it looks like. These aren't the exact same shots. This was on a different day and it was obviously cloudy, but this is about how close you can get to some of this stuff. This was with a 500 millimeter lens, I think. And, you know, they're close, but they're not that close. You need a long telephoto, but you also need to learn to crop. And I'm a firm believer, and you'll see as you go through some of these, there may have been some already that I don't always stick to the ratio that comes out of your camera. I'm going to crop to what I think is good. to what I think makes a dramatic picture and is going to make a good presentation. So I think cropping in tight like that looks a lot nicer. Night air shows are something that are happening at a lot more places. This is a three-plane performance team, and they're difficult to photograph. If they fly too early, it almost ends up like they're flying in the daytime. You've got to learn to darken things down a little bit. And if they're too late, then all you're really seeing are some of their lights. You're not seeing a lot of the airplane. But when they cut through their smoke, their spotlights and landing lights will tend to light that up, and I think it makes it look a lot more dramatic. And this is also a post-production tip, and I lightened this up. You can really see the noise in the background and the clouds. I did that just before I put this together because I thought it looked too dark. I can see a lot of the fringing in that, uh, but the other thing is to use masking in Photoshop or Lightroom to select your subject and lighten it a little bit, just to add a little more emphasis to it so you can see it better. These are from Oshkosh this year. My plan, and it worked out fairly well, was to use a 300-2.8, and I ended up coming down to, I think, 100th of a second, something like that. And you're panning and hoping for the best and hoping that your camera is going to lock onto the airplane and not the fireworks that are going off in different directions. And again, I've mentioned it before, is it's some of this is playing the odds. And I don't want to make it sound like photography isn't technical and something you think about and make work in your favor. But when things are moving really fast, if I'm panning something or if I'm shooting an air to air, I'm playing the odds because the air is bumpy, the planes are moving around. No matter how good your camera focus is, if you lock it down on something, it's going to waver a little bit after a few seconds. So I'm playing the odds on a lot of this stuff. And luckily, you know, I'm going to get some in my favor. Now, as those planes are up there flying, if you don't have a lens that can reach that, or even a camera that can shoot at a fairly high ISO that you're comfortable with, you can put your camera on a tripod and just do really long exposures. I think this one is probably layered. I just stick with the 30 seconds on my camera. That's the maximum. I don't go into bulb, but then I'll just go and drag another one in and hit lighten in my style, my layer style, and it'll just lay another track of the pyro of the fireworks onto it. You know, and it creates some pretty cool patterns. This is something I tried last year where cameras on a tripod, I shot wide and I just, as the plane went through, I just made multiple exposure, or not multiple exposures. That's what it ends up looking like in the picture. But I just brought them all together, each different layers in Photoshop and did the lighten and created what looks like a multiple exposure if the plane had gone through, just to show what his act looks like. This was fireworks. This was probably 10 years ago. It's an old one, but I liked it because everything was red. They were doing, you know, most of the bursts were red, and it just cast this red glow on everything. And it was a last minute thing. I always try to put an airplane in the foreground, and in this case, I was packing up to go and I saw it and I moved up. So I just got the canopy of the airplane, and then all the people in the foreground. Same with this one, trying to put something in the foreground that you can relate to. And this is where it starts to get difficult with what they're doing now. And again, I'm not sure if you have a show in Colorado that's doing this, but The night shows at Oshkosh this year, they've always had fireworks. Now they added drones that make these elaborate pictures in the sky. They've got an airplane flying through with fireworks on it with pyro, and then they were using lasers. And I couldn't get the laser to show in this one, but it's just with everything at once. And if you try to do a slower shutter speed like you're supposed to do with fireworks, like 6 seconds is one of the starting points that I've always heard. ISO 200 at f8 or 11 at 6 seconds and go from there. Then the drone stuff all blurs out. So you got to kind of compromise a little bit. And then you get these really weird color casts from lights that are there. They're lighting the airplane on one side and the fireworks on the other. So the perfectionist in me wanted the planes all normal colored, and I couldn't work it out that way. One other thing you can do, whether it's at an air show or at a small airport, is just riding along. They give rides, they sell rides. And this is one, pilots in the back. There were 2 seats up front that would hold up to 5 people, and I just turned around and took his picture. In this case, I'm flying with a friend in a Piper Cub, just a small plane, held the camera up over my head and shot backwards. You know, this was to hype Bose aviation headsets. So I, was looking to keep that in focus and let the cockpit and everything drop off focus. This was flying a ski plane in the winter, so I wanted to see that winter look, shooting wide. And it's one of those things I always do when we're coming back from a flight is I'll just shoot in the cockpit at night because I think it just looks kind of pretty. All right, a few tips, and I tried to narrow these down, but I always use a brush to clean around my lens because if you're at an air show or an airport, it can be dusty. And I try to do that before changing lenses so I don't have crud around the lens mount. And I also try not to change lenses outside during an air show. You'll notice dust on it shows up in on the sky really bad. You may not see it if you're shooting stuff that doesn't have sky in it, but if you do, or if you're using a slow shutter speed and that relates to a high f-stop, you're really going to see it if you've got it on there. I mentioned this before, it's better to shoot takeoffs because the prop is spinning faster than it is on landing. I use on my Sonys, I've got 1, 2, and 3 programs up on the dial, and I'll do one of them for panning mode, and one of them might be high shutter speed, and the other one might be low shutter speed. So I've got it for panning on landing, I've got it for a prop plane, and I've got it for a jet. And all I have to do is go 1, 2, 3, and it saves me trying to figure out other settings. And I program all my back buttons, not just for back button focus. And a lot of new cameras have that AF on button back there already, but I'll program for eye autofocus and tracking. And that's it. I hope that gave you some inspiration in what you can do with aviation. Um, like I said, it's in a way, it's not just all about airplanes, but it's about your photographic style. And you have so many opportunities to shoot at an air show and kind of let that creative style go and have fun with it.
That's great, Jim. What my initial question is there a website that lists upcoming air shows by state or by a locale? Because you even mentioned it several times, you're not sure if there's any air shows in Colorado, but there's got to be. Todd will know, he's our member in the room. But anyway, is there a website we can look at?
You could try, and I know there are like private ones out there, but you could try, and I'm not sure the exact uh, suffix on it, but ICAS, International Council of Air Shows. And that might be a good starting point. But I think if you just Google air shows in Colorado, air shows in the US, I know there are sites out there. And you'll be amazed at how many air shows there are.
Great, okay. Somebody in the posted a comment, what ISO do you use? Bob, do you want to elaborate on that? What ISO do you use auto?
I gotcha. I tend to use auto a lot more now, and I tend to use it because, and I know we're all shooting different cameras, so I'm not sure what the Canon users have and Nikon and Fuji and I'm shooting Sony, but it's only the recent cameras let you pick a minimum shutter speed. And someone had talked about auto ISO and it's like, no, it doesn't work because I'll go to shoot something and I end up with a 30th of a second shutter speed and everything's unusable. But there are settings now under auto ISO that let you pick a minimum. So I can pick 1/250th or I've got it shortcutted on a button on the back of my camera. So if I'm shooting people with a 70 to 200, I can maybe pick a 1/250th. And it's not going to go below 1/250th. It's going to bump up the ISO then. Uh, if I'm shooting an aperture priority, so I'm at f2.8, say. But if it's going to be something faster, I can real quickly go in and bump it up to 1,000 and know I'm going to freeze the action. So I've had really good luck with auto ISO as long as I have the opportunity to set the minimum shutter speed it's going to go to, if that makes sense. And like I
Yeah,
said, the newer cameras have it, the newer higher end cameras especially, but check your menus because I'm sure they're adding this, it's a very useful feature and I'm sure it's in a lot more cameras than I can think of.
yeah. I know I've got that on my Nikon Z6. So, and that's not that new. Another member, Stuart Little, is wondering, does your Sigma have a live composite mode?
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, I'm not either. Stuart, do you want to unmute and
Yeah, that's a mode that not all cameras have, and I was just Googling that and saw that there's a Sigma model that does have it. But basically, what it does is you set, um, you start the exposure, and then it takes a series of multiple exposures over a period of time until you hit the shutter button again, and at the end, it composites them all together.
Oh, I know. So I want to say Sony has that and I
Yeah.
can't remember what they call it, but it'll end up with a huge file that's really sharp and really big.
Yeah, the Olympus has it, Panasonic has it, and it's a really cool feature. That's how you're able to get nighttime photos that look crisp and have that for like fireworks. It'll show you all of the fireworks, but puts them all together in one, and they're all pretty sharp. It's not like it's going to be blown out or anything.
I like to be honest with these things, and not that I haven't, but I'm kind of old-fashioned, and I know that my Sony cameras have that, and I've never even played with it. I hate to tell you, it's like they have an electronic zoom built into, and I've never played with that.
Yeah.
I will do the Sony and I think Nikon's got it too, where you can do APS-C mode to full frame on a button. Um, and I'll do that to, in effect, do a electronic teleconverter. But I haven't played with a lot of that stuff. And like I said, I'm old-fashioned. I'm old. I tend to do what I know works, and that's simple. But that sounds really cool, and it sounds like something I should look into.
any questions from the Lone Tree crowd?
Peanut gallery?
In the gallery.
Yeah, I've used that on my Olympus, and I know Dan uses it a lot. So, what it does, Jim, at least on this, it's not lens-driven software, it's camera body, and it's built-in software. And, on the Olympus, it just keeps adding new light. Anything that adds additional light. So if you trigger at the beginning of the fireworks, now you're working from a tripod, but as long as you keep it open, any new explosion, multiple fireworks, trigger, shower effect, anytime there's new light, but it keeps it from overexposing all of those things that were already in it. It's an only additive light composite. So it requires, Sony certainly has capability. I just don't know if they have it. Jim, I love your F-22s. I'm going to the Blue Angel show 2 weeks from tomorrow in Branson.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, so, well, the Blue Angel F-22 is Air Force. I guess that was confusing, but they have, and I've got a chance to spend a bunch of time with the pilot of the Raptor. And so he's going to be there in 2 weeks as well.
Well, good luck shooting, and thank you all for the tip on. I'm going to delve into my Sony menus tonight and see what I can do so I'm prepared for the next fireworks show.
The only other program that's really useful in my aviation photography is this thing called ProCap. Olympus calls it ProCapture, and I don't know if Sony has it, but you push you set the number of exposures, you push the shutter halfway down, and if you set it for 15, I'm using it for the knife edge crossover stuff where the crossover speed is 500, 600, 700 miles an hour nose to nose. So it'll shoot 15, and if you keep holding it down, it replaces number 1 with number 16, number 2 with 17, and it just keeps that in the camera's buffer. And then when you when you know that they've crossed paths, you just finish the series, and so you only have to go through 15 images instead of my old 150 when I was shooting 15 frames a second for 10 seconds consecutively.
I'm going to say that almost sounds like pre-capture that my Sonys have, and I think
Pre-capture,
Nikon has that.
Yeah, pre-capture, they call it pro-capture with Olympus, but yeah, it's almost like cheating.
I was going to say the only problem is if I use, being equipment junkies here, if I use the A9 III at 120 frames a second and do a second of pre-capture, I end up with an awful lot of pictures. So
Well, some of these systems will let you set it. They'll set the limit, and I'm using electronic shutter, and it's 110 frames a second. But I've only got to nail about a 2-second window, and I can set it again on this cycle. Maximum 15 at half shutter, and then it takes 15 more when you push the shutter to. I don't know if Sony has it, but again, for aviation, Blue Angels and Thunderbirds, it almost feels like cheating. But I'm not going to say anything else. That I actually,
there's one other thing talking about equipment, and I didn't go into lenses that much because, we all have our own budgets and have what we have. But they do make this little like red dot tracker that goes on your hot shoe. And there's a company selling them that they sell that and grips for long lenses, but they want, I bought one for, I don't know if it was $200 or something. It was really pricey. Um, you can buy, I think I bought one from Daisy for 25 bucks off Amazon and jury rigged my own little thing to fit on a hot shoe. But basically, if you're going to shoot jets going by or cars, is you pop this thing on and you just have to get it aligned with the target beforehand, set it on a tripod and aim at a tree branch or something and just get it lined up. And then all you're doing is looking through this little viewfinder with a red dot or green dot in it and just keeping it on the subject. So instead of having it up to your eye where it's difficult to see what's all around you, now you've got the camera out at a distance and it's a whole lot easier just to track it. You can keep both eyes open if you want, as long as you're keeping that little target on the subject. I was going to say that almost sounds like cheating, but it's funny. I've got one, but I don't use it that much. And I don't know if that goes back to me saying I'm old-fashioned and like it's simple. I always fall back on the easiest stuff.
If it looks at all like a laser, the military shows won't let you use it.
No, it's not a laser. It doesn't project anything. It's like a pistol sight. Those don't project. A sight on a handgun or even on a rifle. You can buy a laser that projects, but these are just an optical aid. And it's just a red dot in the center of a circle or center of a square. It doesn't project anything. You can search it online. And like I said, for airplanes or cars, it can make it a lot easier trying to pan and keep it in the field of view.
Jim, somehow I have the feeling that if you were to have a disposable point and shoot camera in your hand, you would come up with amazing pictures regardless of the equipment. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Totally.
I was going to say, except there's this little thing about always trying to buy the best, the latest, the latest technology. I don't know if that just comes from I'm a kind of a geek guy when it comes to that, and I want the fastest, or if it's just, the older I get, the more I want good autofocus just to keep up with my age.
So you're shooting Sony bodies and Kyle said you're a Sigma ambassador, so are you shooting Sigma glass?
Actually, I'm not a Sigma ambassador anymore. I just left that about a month ago and haven't updated some of my bios. But I've still got like 2/3 of my lenses are Sigma, but I've added Sony's got some really good long telephotos like the 400 to 800.
Yeah.
And they just came out with a 50 to 150. So I'm adding some Sony glass in there. To be honest with you, I was a Canon guy most of my life. Nikon and Canon, switch back and forth sometimes, but mostly Canon. And when I was a Sigma ambassador, if you wanted to shoot all the new lenses, you had to shoot Sony. Everything was an E-mount because Canon and Nikon wouldn't license full frame glass. So, and Sony's good. I actually know very few people that shoot Sony. If I'm in a club meeting like this, or even my friends, I think there's one other person that shoots Sony. So it's limiting in a way, although they've also got some really cool cameras. The A9 III shooting at 120 frames a second. Shooting baseball, you can watch the ball go right into the glove or the bat. It's like watching a movie. So, it has its advantages, but it's got some disadvantages.
You asked about auto or shows in Colorado, whatever, and I just looked it up. There's the Great Colorado Air Show in Loveland on the September 20th and 21st coming up. So
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And it's the Air Force, I think, this time.
yeah, the Air Force this time. Yeah, Air Force Thunderbirds will be.
Sounds like a good one.
Yeah, so this again, the link is in the Zoom chat for anybody who wants it, and I can pop this out in an email to everybody. But I just did a search for like Jim said, the ICAS Air Show calendar thing, and this is one of the first things that popped up. So yeah, it does let you sort by state, and you can see that in September there's a couple, like Bill said, you know, we got Montrose, Loveland, where the Thunderbirds are going to be, and then Pueblo, where the Thunderbirds are going to be.
Nice, that's super helpful.
Yeah, I've done both of those. They're both good shows.
Mhm. So yeah, there's obviously resources out there to find events to go shoot. Um, Jim, there's one of the, you talked a number of times about 500, 600, 800 millimeter lenses. I am assuming that you are not hand-holding these. Do you normally use a monopod, or do you go tripod and a gimbal?
Nope. Which is interesting point at the end there, but I handhold everything.
Oh, wow.
Especially for aviation, because things are moving so quickly, and it's just from the angle that they're at, it would be too, especially for me, it would be too difficult. I've tried monopods in sports, and I'm going to kill the person next to me when, you know, the action takes a turn and I twist the camera, I want to go vertical and whip the monopod up and hit somebody. But I just learned through the years that I just handhold. Um, you know, the Sigma 60 to 600 is kind of beefy, but you know, I just either rest it or set it on the ground between plays. The other thing is it's my workout. You know, if I got a workout every Friday night doing high school football, so that works out all right.
There you go.
But I've been interested in the gimbal idea, especially like for panning. You know, I can pan at a 60th of a second, can be a little rough sometimes. But I'm wondering if you're on a gimbal and you lock it into just horizontal, if you
Mhm.
can get some really cool stuff that way. Or even on a gimbal, can you track a plane, you know, can you follow a plane coming in? Because that has seems to have so much more flexibility than if you're on a ball head. I'm not sure if it really does, but if anything, you could let go of it and it's supposed to, if you've got it balanced, it's going to stay there.
Can't do it all.
So that's an interesting concept I've never tried.
Hmm. Awesome. All right. Well,
Yeah,
flex
yeah.
force, man.
Well, he's shooting at 2000th to 4000th on the jets. So
Yeah.
if he can hold the 800 up long enough, I mean it's not going to be blurry.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm not the best. I know there are people that can do full prop circles on an air show plane, a propeller one. Like I said, 250 might be the lowest I can go, but stabilization between the camera and the lens, especially if it's the same
Mm.
manufacturer, so they communicate better, is pretty good. You know, it's improved the odds. It's not perfect, but you know, it's pretty good these days.
Well, I was just really impressed with the breadth of photos you had. I mean, you did talk about how you used a lot of telephoto stuff, but your wide angle things were breathtaking as well. The nighttime stuff, just all really, really great stuff, Jim. And so grateful that you were able to join us.
I appreciate you asking me to, and, I think I hopefully got the point across, but where I'm coming from with a lot of this is when I worked at EAA, it was, I mean, it was work, but I don't know, it wasn't all airplanes. All right, I'm going to have trouble finding the words for this, but there are just so many different aspects to aviation, you know, that it's not just air show. And I think some of that comes from my friends that that's all they care about. And in all honesty, I'd rather go and shoot some really cool detailed pictures of stuff or people, you know, pilots dressed up in their gear, or I did a layout for Flying Magazine that will come out sometime this fall, and then I put a similar one up on Facebook after Oshkosh in July of the reenactors in their World War II area, and you know, I like people, I like shooting that kind of stuff as much as I like action, so. You know, it's just I find so much variety is there. It's just a matter of slowing down and going with your specialty of what you like.
I thought you did a really good job of articulating that with your photos that you showed us tonight, honestly, because I saw a lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting to see, the detail in the engines and the cockpits and things like that. So it was just sort of eye-opening.
Well, I think some of it too is there are those of us that like action and air show, you know, the jets and all of that. But what if somebody doesn't have the equipment or doesn't care about it, you know? But there's so much opportunity uh, for, you know, so many different genres of photography at an air show, you know, between the people and the planes and the colors and the shapes and everything like that, that, you know, there's a little bit for everybody, I think, if you just look around.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, I think you demonstrated that. And like Ben said earlier, you could show up at one of those shows with a disposable and take great pictures. I think so. You've definitely honed your craft, and it is some great stuff.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
Just applause.
Yeah, it's awesome. Jim, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And just a great presentation.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Jim,
Well-
thank you very much. It was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.